Ben 10 is iconic, and the most iconic thing about Ben 10 is the aliens. That all goes without saying, but which aliens are the most iconic? While there is a discussion to be made for who some of Ben's most popular aliens are, if you were to ask someone who the Mount Rushmore of these aliens were, I have confidence that the same 4 aliens would come to all of their minds. Heatblast, Diamondhead, Accelerate, and Fourarms. Introduced in the classic series among the original 10, these 4 aliens would cement themselves as some of Ben's most iconic aliens for a multitude of reasons. For this video, I want to go over who each of these 4 aliens are, and discuss what makes them some of the most well-known and beloved aliens in the entire franchise. Regarding the order of aliens I'll talk about first, second, third, and last, I'm gonna go in order from least favorite to favorite of the 4. I want to talk about as much as possible given the legendary icon status these aliens hold, which includes their screen time from classic all the way up to Omniverse, all the creative ways their powers are utilized, other appearances in merchandise and media, interesting lore about their species or home planet, and just how consistently entertaining these aliens were throughout the entire franchise. I can already tell as I record this audio that this is going to be a behemoth of a video, so let's start with our first alien on the list who ironically has the word 4 in their name, Fourarms. Fourarms is a Tetraman from the planet Koros, and would first appear in the classic series episode, Washington, BC. To start off with his design, it's definitely one of the less intricate of the original 10, but there's still details I really like. For starters, his uniform. As with most of Ben's aliens in the classic series, their uniform correlates with Ben's regular clothing, and Fourarms' shirt closely resembles Ben's, in fact, the closest out of all of Ben's aliens. I think the fingerless gloves look pretty good, and I also like the little bumps on his arms. And while it's minor, I do like the fact that his teeth are slightly purple. Usually when aliens have different colored teeth, it tends to be yellow, so seeing purple's a little more unique. As you can tell from his appearance, Fourarms' main ability is his super strength. Something that sets him apart from other characters with super strength as their main ability is the fact that he has 2 pairs of arms. Because of this, there is potential for more creative ways that Fourarms can utilize his strength that other characters wouldn't be able to do. So the question is whether or not Ben 10 takes advantage of their character design for Fourarms and utilize him in very fun and creative ways. To find out, let's talk about his first appearance in Washington, BC. Before I get into Fourarms' fight scene, I want to talk about 2 things we see immediately that I really like. The first thing being his transformation sequence. The shot of the arm growing veins going up to the eye is so iconic. In fact, it's so iconic that 3 aliens had this exact same startup. Then we get this shot of Ben's back where he grows the extra pair of arms, and look at the veins on his back and his arms, like, the muscles and veins look fucking insane. And then we get this quick turnaround where Fourarms does the iconic pose where he raises his arms up and yells, and it's just so cool. The other thing we see right away that I really like is his voice. Fourarms is played by Richard McGonigal, who does a very growly, monstrous voice for Fourarms, which fits really well. Although as the series goes on, the voice would become less monstrous and more of a higher pitch, which still sounds pretty good, but I think it's a bit of a downgrade.
Let's wrestle! You want to be king? Get ready to be crowned! Hey! I meant to do that! Maybe I'm finally getting the hang of this thing. That Gwen is telling the truth, which means you must be lying.
It still sounds pretty good, but I do wonder why they decided to change it to a higher pitch later on. Moving on to the fight itself, I think that this is a very neat debut for Fourarms. Given that Fourarms' main ability is his super strength, it's highlighted pretty well here. Fourarms is used to fight off a reanimated woolly mammoth, not just by throwing punches, but also by swinging it around its trunk, similar to how Mario does to Bowser in Mario 64. We also get a showcase of Fourarms' jump height and durability. Fourarms can jump incredibly high, something he does very often throughout the show. And in terms of durability, Fourarms is definitely one of Ben's most durable aliens, considering that he falls from such a great height and makes a giant crater before transforming back, holy shit. But yeah, this is actually a pretty good debut for Fourarms. It doesn't go on for too long, but it showcases some cool stuff Fourarms can do in a fight. Nothing too crazy, but this does show promise. As we move on to future appearances for Fourarms, I'm not going to mention every single time he appears. Not only because I don't want this video to be any longer than it needs to be, but also for a reason that's very obvious to longtime Ben 10 fans, which I'll get into later. For now, let's talk about the next appearances I want to highlight for Fourarms, which are Kevin 11 and Framed. I think the first 2 fights Fourarms has with Kevin are some of my favorite Fourarms moments. While it's nice to see Fourarms hold his own and showcase more durability, the main reason I like these two scenes are for one specific moment. During the fight, Ben's about to transform back, so he decides to pull no punches and goes crazy on Kevin. And just look at how good this is. He just goes for one punch after the other, no stopping until he finally finishes it off with a powerful blow. Like, this is pretty damn cool. But not as cool as is seen in Framed. It's already nice that we get to see Fourarms take on Diamondhead, which is arguably the two strongest aliens in the original 10 physically, but I love this one scene where Fourarms just goes relentless on Kevin as Diamondhead. Like, you just gotta see how raw this is yourself. I can't put it into words. It can also be seen as symbolic payback considering that Kevin did this to Ben in his debut. But Kevin isn't the only one where Fourarms has some pretty ruthless fights in. Another scene that I like is in The Ultimate Weapon. Fourarms' fight against Apook is pretty good. Not only because he fights Apook with a giant stone column, but Ben just takes a fucking beating here, which I know is not a credit to Fourarms specifically, like it's more so giving credit to the fact that the villain's kicking his ass, but like, god damn, he's just a kid, man. But that final swing against Apook is pretty damn good, and look at the facial expression too, like Ben put a lot into that charge. Although the real MVP in terms of strength and durability in this fight is Gwen, because look at the way she just survives a shield hit like it's fucking nothing. I think when Fourarms uses objects to fight, it makes it a lot more interesting than just simple punches, something we get to see in The Unnaturals, where he fights using giant baseball related items, which is pretty fun and comical at the same time. And of course, if I'm gonna mention Fourarms using objects, I gotta mention Lucky Girl. Easily my favorite Fourarms moment in all of Classic. Besides the obvious fact that Fourarms using a sword in a cemetery to fight off living statues just sounds badass to say, let alone see. There's also this one moment where he takes one of the statues by the neck and basically breaks his head off, but from the point of view we see, it looks like he's snapping his neck, which is crazy as fuck. Also, Fourarms looks pretty beaten up in this whole fight. Like, this is such a cool moment. And the one part where it slows down when he uses the sword to break one of the statues and the sword itself also breaks, like, it's just so good. Then there's really cool moments like Monster Weather. The first thing we see Fourarms do is the seismic clap, something he actually learned by watching another Tetraman in a previous episode. So the fact that he was able to learn something from a member of Fourarms' species is really cool, and the seismic clap itself is also really cool. Seeing Fourarms work his way up to the weather monster's head and then playing guitar is really fun to see, but I will mention this like I did in my Blitzwolfer video, this scene clearly should have went to Blitzwolfer, but if you want to know more about that, then check out that video. And while there's no fighting in this scene, I do want to mention Superhero Alien Buddy Adventures because seeing Fourarms save some kids in a roller coaster while outrunning the roller coaster breaking behind him is pretty sick. The last episode I want to highlight for Classic Fourarms is Ready to Rumble. There isn't anything too crazy to mention, even though this episode does have a good chunk centered around Fourarms, but I do like the fact that despite being at a disadvantage in a 2-against-1 fight, he's still able to take on the gator and the porcupine with ease. It's a testament to how strong Fourarms can be, especially when he's in a bad spot. Fourarms' utilization in Classic is pretty good. In fact, I was a lot more enthusiastic about a lot of his scenes, more than I expected to be, considering that Fourarms is one of my lesser favorite aliens in the franchise. I don't hate him or anything, but basic super strength is not something I really care for unless the fighting itself is incredibly raw, and thankfully Fourarms does have a few scenes that feel incredibly raw. Now it's time to move on to the UAF era. For the first time in my alien videos, I actually get to talk about a classic alien in UAF in full detail. This is because the Ultimate Alien unfortunately didn't actually give us the classic aliens as the theme song promised, and while I did do Ripjaws where he did have one episode, the other classic aliens I talked about did not appear in the show proper at all. Fourarms, however, was on the more fortunate side as he was able to get plenty of screen time throughout Ultimate Alien. But before we get into Fourarms' screen time, let's talk about his new design and his new voice. Ultimate Alien Fourarms is definitely more on the controversial side, and I know it's a rather hot take, but I think that this is the best design for Fourarms. I love Ultimate Alien Fourarms. Now, let's talk about the things I don't like, and it's only one thing. That fucking ponytail, cut that shit off now. But the rest of the design is really great. I love the gold armor, I love the bracelets, I love how he looks, like he just looks so great. I like the gold straps connecting to the badge on the chest, like this is a fantastic design. Although I can't say the same for his voice. While it's not a bad voice by any means, he is voiced by D. Bradley Baker, which I'll admit, this voice is a little bit more on the generic side compared to most of his aliens in UAF. That doesn't mean it's bad, I just don't care for it as much as other aliens.
Fourarms! Oh, didn't even know that was still in there. What's going on here? My parents are gone, the neighbors are gone. I wreck half the block and nobody comes out to see what's happening. Nobody calls the cops. Fourarms! Captain Nemesis! Why are you shouting your name out? It's stupid!
Before we get into Fourarms' screen time in Ultimate Alien, I do want to talk about his appearance in the Generator X crossover. I always have a habit of forgetting to mention this special for the most part because honestly, I just don't think about it whenever I'm talking about appearances in the show because it's technically not a part of the show, even if it is canon. But Fourarms' design is so good here, like the tattoos and just the way he looks in his art style is just so fucking good. I don't even have anything analytical to say, I just think it's awesome. Now while I favor Fourarms in Ultimate Alien in terms of his design, can I say the same for his screen time? Sadly, there isn't as many episodes I want to highlight for Ultimate Alien as I want to for Classic because honestly, Fourarms took a step back when it came to quality of his utilization. I'll go more into detail after I talk about every iteration of Fourarms in the Prime continuity, so for now, I'll just talk about the appearances of Ultimate Alien Fourarms I do want to highlight, starting with his first appearance in video games. Fourarms is used at the beginning of the episode to fight Serpent. I like that he uses his two underarms in order to sandwich Serpent in between two cars. I think that's kinda cool. But that's all he really does as this scene is pretty brief considering it's an opener. Regarding future appearances, I think his scene in Girl Trouble's pretty neat. I like seeing him bash some Computrons and picking them up and throwing them and stuff, that's all pretty fun. I like that in basic training he fights a member of his species and while he doesn't end up winning the fight, it's still pretty cool to see him fight another Tetraman in UAF. I also like that in the Forge of Creation, when Ben ends up meeting the past version of himself, they both become Fourarms and bond over mistransformations. While neither Fourarms doesn't do anything necessarily cool in this episode, it was really neat to see them both together at once. The last episode I want to highlight for UAF Fourarms is Night of the Living Nightmare. While it's not much, seeing him swing a street lamp with a DN alien on it to crash into a house is a little fun. While I've mentioned some nice moments I do enjoy with Fourarms, I won't lie, despite being one of the most iconic aliens, I feel like that Ultimate Alien Fourarms doesn't really exemplify that. He does make a handful of appearances, but a lot of them don't really amount to much. Sure, he's fighting in most of them, but the fighting itself is generic for the most part, and then when he isn't fighting, he's doing nothing at all. In the episode Couples Retreat, I shit you not, he appears to just be standing there and he talks for a little bit. Like, what was the point of Fourarms being there? My only assumption is that he was trying to get the door to anywhere to open with his strength, but the thing is that we kinda see him do that already in Where the Magic Happens, and it didn't work then, why would it work now? So Fourarms has been half and half so far. In Classic, he had some pretty cool scenes. In Ultimate Alien, he had like a good scene or two, but for the most part, he was kinda just there. While Ultimate Alien took a dip in quality in terms of his utilization, can Omniverse pick that back up? Well, let's find out as we now talk about Omniverse Fourarms. Fourarms once again has a love it or hate it design, and honestly I'm not a fan of this one. I will give credit that I actually do like his uniform, but I hate his proportions in the facial hair, it's so stupid. Why did he keep trying to give Fourarms hair? He looks so much better bald. The hair just looks so plastered on and weird. I like the wristbands with the gloves, it's not as cool as the fingerless gloves from Classic, but you know, I still dig this, and I like that there's more bumps on not only his arms, but his head and his shoulders. But again, I really don't like the proportions. It kinda looks like you took Classic Fourarms and you just stretched them out in MS Paint. I don't like it. In fact, on the subject of Fourarms designs, Omniverse Fourarms should have taken some notes from Ben 10,000's Fourarms. It would be neat to see some stuff like the Fangs implemented, given that this is an older Fourarms after Classic. And I might as well also take the time to mention that 4-year-old Ben turned into Fourarms in Classic. I like that he's scrawny and has buggy eyes, but there's nothing really else to talk about with this design. It's weird because I'll get into it more later, but like all the Tetramans that appear in Omniverse look so good, and then you just get Fourarms and he's like the only one that doesn't look good. How the fuck did they manage to do that? But if it means anything, 11-year-old Fourarms doesn't look that bad. It's just classic Fourarms with green eyes, a green badge, and the Omniverse art style. It's basically a lesser version of Classic. Fourarms is voiced this time around by John DiMaggio, and I think his performance is pretty good for Fourarms. I don't think it's as good as Richard McGonigal, but I feel like John DiMaggio's performance is even with D. Bradley Baker's. I can't decide between those two who I like more, but either way I prefer Richard McGonigal the most.
You think you're the only galvanic mechamorph I've ever dealt with? It's gonna take a lot more to surprise me.
Ben?
Can't really talk now, Mom. I've kinda got my hands full.
Despite the questionable redesign in the OK voice, does Omniverse improve his screen time after UAF? And at the same time, also be able to be as consistently cool, or even cooler, than he was in Classic? Well, considering that I don't want to really mention too many episodes for Omniverse, I think that might answer your question. But let's keep an open mind and see what Omniverse Fourarms has to offer. In his first appearance in Omniverse, he is used at the beginning of the episode The More Things Changed Part 1 as the first transformation we see in the entire series. Fourarms fights against malware, and I like seeing him use a giant tree as a bat, and he even makes a corny pun on top of that. And I do love my corny puns.
Four arms.
That's all he really does here, but it's also the first scene of the first episode, so you don't really need to ask for much, even if Fourarms is a veteran since Classic. His first appearance for 16-year-old Ben would be in the episode Many Happy Returns. It was pretty cool to see Fourarms fight off Luma Redwind, especially considering the fact that he ends up beating her, even though we learned earlier in the episode that female Tetramans are traditionally stronger than male Tetramans. The colliding punch between both Tetramans is pretty cool, and I also like that to defeat her, he takes a piece of like the stadium and knocks her out like a whack-a-mole game. And that's about it for all the Omniverse episodes for Fourarms I want to mention. I'm not kidding. Any other scene that he has at best is okay, but at its worst, it's very uninteresting. So what exactly makes Fourarms get less and less interesting as the series goes on? To answer this question, it all has to do with the lack of one thing: creativity. Despite Fourarms having 2 pairs of arms to make his strength in fighting stand out, they almost never take advantage of this. An example of this is in Many Happy Returns. While it's a very brief moment, when Shock Squatch is fighting Luma, she's held up by her upper arms, but uses her underarms in order to elbow Shock Squatch twice. That's pretty cool and creative, as you wouldn't be able to see other super strength characters or aliens really do that. In Classic, you see Fourarms using all of his arms one at a time, going 1, 2, 3, 4 with all 4 of them, but in UAF and Omniverse, he's only doing a basic punch, and sure, maybe sometimes he uses 2 of them at once, but it feels just like a regular punch, so there's no impact or fun creativity behind it. We also almost never see Fourarms even use some real super strength. Besides the basic punching, he doesn't like carry a whole bunch of big shit or like crash through a bunch of shit. Like, yeah, sometimes he might do that in UAF or Omniverse, but it's very minor and it happens so fast, you might as well blink and you'll miss it. His fights also just don't feel as dynamic. In Classic, all of his fights feel like they're choreographed with such action and fast pacing, but UAF and Omniverse just don't pack the same punch. It also doesn't help that later on we would get Humongosaur, who used to be creative at first with his growing ability, but once they forgot that in Omniverse, he just became another Fourarms. And sometimes these two would appear in the same episode doing the exact same shit, which is redundant. Despite his flaws in UAF and Omniverse regarding his screen time, Fourarms is still one of the most iconic aliens in the entire franchise. Classic alone helped him become the iconic alien that he is. With the combination of a lot of screen time and a lot of neat things to do, Fourarms became pretty popular, not only from being everywhere in the show, but also everywhere in different forms of Ben 10 media. I want to take some time to appreciate some of Fourarms' artwork because he honestly does have a lot of nice art. Check out the Andrew Robinson art. Look at how dynamic this pose is, and the detailing on his arms and the fingernails and the veins on his neck and everything. This is such good art. Then there's these 2 pieces of artwork, which I'm pretty sure was for the Ben 10 Hyperscan game, though I'm not 100% sure on that. I like the one where he's punching through the rocks especially. There's also his concept art, which I actually really like. They give him like a little extra bump on the back of his head and a lot more bumps on his arms than he usually has. And I don't know if it's the angle specifically, but he just looks a lot more fatter than the actual version we get in the show. There's also plenty of art of him by crew members, which all look really good. It's mainly the Classic and Omniverse forms, but there's a lot of great different art styles and dynamic posings for these. Then of course there's merchandise like toys. He has the standard 4-inch figure, and he also has a battle version toy which includes a rock for him to throw, kinda like Gutsman and Megaman. His DNA alien hero figure has a transparent chest where you can see some muscles inside, and then you can have his arms move to show him flexing. He was one of the various aliens given a vehicle, and in his case, it's an animal. I think the design is pretty cool, and it was even brought back for Omniverse. He also has some miscellaneous stuff such as an alien rock or a sumo slammer or a minifigure, although the funniest of the miscellaneous stuff is the loofah. Yes, the loofah.
We've been trapped by a loofah? No!
But my all-time favorite Classic Fourarms toy goes to the Metamorph figure. This one was mainly used to hold backpacks and stuff to show off his strength, which is kind of cool that they try to do that. Although my favorite part was really just the articulation and the size of the toy. When you're playing with these toys at 6 years old and you have the Metamorph Fourarms, it feels like you're playing with the actual Fourarms, given how tall he is compared to everyone else in the show. UAF and Omniverse also has some Fourarms merchandise, though not nearly as interesting. UAF gives him a standard 4-inch figure as well as a Hyper Alien figure, and I think the Hyper Alien figure looks fine. I like the detailing on the straps connected to his chest, but I don't know how I feel about the black leather being detailed like that. I think it looks kinda off. Also, the bumps on his arms being black? I actually kinda like that. Omniverse gives us a 4-inch figure as well as a 6-inch figure, which is okay, I guess. You mainly just have Fourarms punching repeatedly, and that's really it, which is not very interesting. Fourarms would also appear in the majority of the Ben 10 video games. He is one of the 5 playable aliens and Protector of Earth. I don't really like playing as him as much as the other aliens in the game, but I do like that he has the seismic clap like in the show. Fourarms is playable in Cosmic Destruction, but only in the PlayStation 3 version of the game. I was an Xbox kid growing up, so I don't know how he plays, so if he does anything cool, let me know. Otherwise, as far as I'm aware, he just does basic punches. He also makes a playable appearance in Galactic Racing. He also makes an appearance in both Omniverse games. I do like that in Omniverse 1 he climbs gated walls, kind of reminding me of Super Mario World, although I don't think he's that interesting compared to other aliens. Fourarms also appears in a few Flash games, and while he doesn't really do anything interesting in them, I figured it was still worth mentioning. Before I finish off Fourarms' segment for this video, I want to take some time to talk about his lore, specifically with his planet. The battle version of Fourarms comes with a card that talks about what his planet looks like and how the planet is. Apparently, due to a massive amount of conflict, the planet's culture began to devolve. What was once a civilized society became a barren wasteland. But then we get to see how Koros is in Omniverse. And while I like how it's handled there, I can't lie, I think the classic lore is a little better. Sure, we still get the desert wasteland and everything, but like, you're gonna tell me that this isn't a civilized society? This planet has fucking food courts and car shows. One thing I really love is that every Tetraman looks fantastic in this show, and they wear a lot of clothing similar to the UAF Fourarms design. And considering that UAF had no uniforms unlike Classic and Omniverse, I like to think that there's an implication that the Ultimatrix gives an alien clothing based off the alien's culture rather than a different type of jumpsuit that correlates with Ben's clothing. It's nice that even with Omniverse forms not being that interesting, his planet and his species more than make up for it. Regardless of my thoughts on UAF or Omniverse Fourarms in terms of utilization, Fourarms remained one of the most iconic aliens in the entire franchise. The combination of being one of the original 10, having a great first impression thanks to his cool scenes in Season 1 onward in Classic, and just being well known through a lot of merchandise and stuff, I think Fourarms cemented his place as one of the Mount Rushmore of Ben 10. He's my least favorite of the 4 aliens we're going to talk about, not only because I don't care for super strength as a power alone, but I feel like out of all the aliens in this video, he was handled the worst when it comes to his later appearances after Classic. So moving on, the handling of these aliens are going to get a lot better. As for which alien we're going to talk about next, that's none other than the very first alien that Ben ever turns into in the entire series, which is everyone's favorite alien candle, Heatblast. Heatblast is a Pyronite from the star Pyros and would first appear in the very first episode of Ben 10, and then there were 10. I love how simple yet intricate Heatblast's character design is. The segmented rocks all over his body with the flaming head and the face plates goes really well together. And I love that his feet are uniquely shaped to not make himself look as humanoid. As you can tell from Heatblast's name and character design, his main ability is pyrokinesis. Heatblast can shoot fire and manipulate it as he sees fit. And as we go throughout all of his appearances, we're going to see very creative ways that his fire abilities are used. Heatblast also has one of my favorite voices of the original 10, which is Steve Bloom.
Hey, I'm on fire, and I'm okay. Check it out. I'm totally hot.
This is your only warning. Knock off the funny business, or I'll fry your twinkling butts.
On a side note, one of my all-time favorite animes is Bigga, which you can probably tell because of my current profile picture of Dorothy Wainwright. The reason why I bring this up is because the main character of that show, Roger Smith, is also voiced by Steve Bloom. So now every time that I hear Heatblast, I just hear Roger Smith.
I'm sure you all want to thank me personally, but really it's all in a day's work for... No way! A gold sumo slammer card! I finally understood the old fisherman when he said that the Titan of the sea was angry. And these seas do give off a quiet kind of anger.
Given that Heatblast has a good design, a neat concept for powers, and a cool voice, it's no surprise he would become one of the most iconic Ben 10 aliens. I'd even argue the most iconic, but that's a whole other debate to be had. One of the main reasons for his iconic status is of course being the first alien Ben ever becomes, but a big factor for how he's so iconic as well comes from his actual screen time. Despite the basic concept of Heatblast's powers, being able to shoot and control fire, the show actually ends up doing a lot of creative stuff with such a basic premise. But before we talk about all the super creative stuff, let's start with his debut in the first episode of Ben 10, and then there were 10. Heatblast is used when Ben first gets the Omnitrix, and as such has no idea what the hell is happening. Ben figures out rather quickly that not only does the fire he's made out of not hurt him, but that he can shoot fire as well. In doing so, he ends up accidentally starting a forest fire, and after explaining the situation to Gwen and Grandpa Max gives Ben the idea to perform a backfire, creating a new fire to snuff out the old one. For a first appearance and the first alien transformation animation on screen, I think it's pretty good. It sets up the idea of Ben turning into aliens and Heatblast's powers without being too much or too little. It's neat that Ben makes mistakes given that this is his literal first time as an alien, and the solution is one you wouldn't expect to see. It's especially great that we learn of how Heatblast's powers work alongside Ben in real time. One thing really small that I never see anyone acknowledge is the fact that when Gwen first runs into Ben as Heatblast, he fucks with her a little bit by shooting fire at her shoe. But not a lot, just a little bit to show he already has a good idea of how to manipulate his fire, and the amount that he shoots. With a good introduction, can the rest of Heatblast's appearances not only be entertaining, but show off more cool and creative ways that he can be utilized? I think the answer is pretty obvious, not just for longtime Ben 10 fans, but even the most casual of viewers. But I'm gonna take some time to appreciate his future appearances anyway. The next appearance I want to highlight is Washington, BC. In this episode, we learn that Heatblast can absorb fire, which makes him pretty much the go-to alien to save someone from a house fire. Also, the way he exits the house with this funnel, tube, cyclone, whatever of fire looks really cool. Then there's episodes like Tourist Trap. This is one of my favorite Heatblast scenes, honestly, because this is the first time we get to see Heatblast fly, and it's not like Ben already knows how to do this, we see Ben learn this power in real time. Although he's not perfect at it at first, given that it's his first time since he crashes into a wall at some point, which I think is a nice detail considering that later on in the show, we're going to see him fly some more and perfect it at that point. We also get to see that Heatblast's projectiles aren't just standard size, as he creates a giant fireball that's bigger than himself. Although if I were to pick my favorite scene for Heatblast in Season 1, it obviously has to go to Secrets. When Vilgax sends out some drones to lure out Ben, Ben chooses to go Heatblast, and the action in this scene is so good. Seeing him just wail on all the drones with his fire, it's so well animated. I love this scene so much. Like seriously, look at how much fire he's shooting. And I thought the Battle of Valhalla had so much fire in one place. And it doesn't just stop there, because after Vilgax finally confronts Ben, sure, Heatblast gets his ass kicked, but Heatblast does manage to do something really cool in the scene anyway. One thing I really like is that in order to slow down Vilgax, Heatblast melts the entire street into tar. This is a pretty creative way to use his powers to help him out in a tight spot, and I can't forget to mention how cool it was to see Heatblast fly as Vilgax's ship explodes. As we move on to the later seasons of Classic, Heatblast still has plenty of moments of great utilization. One example is Monster Weather. I love the fire swords that Heatblast makes in order to cut through the water, and seeing him go Hypernova in order to make the water monster turn into steam is also really cool. Then there's Superhero Alien Buddy Adventures. We get to see more of Heatblast's fire absorption, and we get a cool action sequence with Kangaroo Commando. Seeing him shoot fireballs while he does all these fun poses is really charming. Ben isn't the only one who could do cool stuff with Heatblast, as in the episode Gwen 10, we get to see Gwen use Heatblast, and in that episode, she spells out her own name in fireworks. Another interesting variation of Heatblast is when he's sick, like in Side Effects. I should also mention that Fourarms is in this episode, however in his case he didn't really do anything interesting, he just had the armpits of a Donkey Kong mane. When Heatblast is sick, his pyrokinesis becomes cryokinesis, which Heatblast uses to his advantage to cool down a nuclear reactor. I won't lie, I do like the scene and a lot of people consider this a very iconic moment for Heatblast, but I can't lie. Him being sick meaning he has ice powers is so cartoonishly convenient it makes me laugh a little. The last moment in the show proper I want to highlight is Don't Drink the Water. Ben is turned into a 4-year-old, and at the end of the episode, Gwen tricks him into using Heatblast to go supernova with a toddler tantrum. It's kind of crazy to consider that if this is the power of a 4-year-old Pyronite, just imagine how powerful an adult Pyronite would be. Now you may have noticed that I said the last scene in the show proper, and that's because there's one more scene I want to highlight for Classic Heatblast. Not because it's necessarily cool, but because it's in live action. Heatblast is one of the 4 aliens to appear in Ben 10 Race Against Time. Given that this is a TV movie in 2007, I won't be too harsh on his design, and I honestly don't think it's that bad. My only big gripe is the rocks on his body. I'm not a fan of the extra cracks they give on both his body and his face. I don't think it looks that good. And I'm not a fan of the rounder shape for his face as well. He's in the opening of the movie, and the fight scene's okay, but honestly, I feel like they should have just tried less. And what I mean by that is, they have this moment where he flies, but it's just so barely off the ground, it just makes me look at him, it's like he's going half a mile an hour. And it does crack me up to see Heatblast burn Eon to death like he's Arvis to Sigurd in Fire Emblem 4. Alright, I promise that's my last genealogy joke. Maybe. Besides his live action appearance, I feel like every other appearance that I've mentioned for Heatblast really shows off how iconic he is. So let's see if that can stay consistent as we move on to Ultimate Alien. Every iteration of Heatblast isn't drastically different from his original and Classic, but I still feel like there's things I want to talk about with the Ultimate Alien design. Now this may be a hot take, but Ultimate Alien Heatblast is my favorite of the 3 designs that we have for him. I love the darker rocks, it just looks so good on Heatblast, and looking at all of his artwork and how he looks in the show, he just looks phenomenal. And thankfully he looks this good because it could have been a lot worse, and we actually get to see evidence of that before 16-year-old Heatblast makes his debut in the show. 10-year-old Ben in Forge of Creation uses Heatblast, and I'm not too big on how he looks. It's not the end of the world, but he just does not look that well in terms of his detailing. It's like they try to make the original Heatblast, but still gave him some of the UAF elements, and it does not look good in this case. They didn't even bother giving him that magma filter that he had in Classic. That would have at least helped a little bit. Although, to give credit to Forge of Creation Heatblast, at least they try to recreate his classic transformation sequence. Which I will say now, for the original, I do like, but it's too short and simple compared to the other ones we get later on for other aliens. And in terms of UAF, it's nice that we get this because 16-year-old Ben doesn't have a transformation sequence for Heatblast. Heatblast is voiced by D. Bradley Baker in Ultimate Alien, and while it doesn't compare to the iconicness of Steve Bloom, I think the voice itself is still fine.
I'm fresh out of tanks, your hiney, but I am bringing the heat. Guess I shouldn't be surprised to see you, Milgax. Can't keep a bad man down.
Now that we've gone over the UAF version of Heatblast with his design and his voice, let's talk about how he's actually used in the show. Starting with his first appearance in Ultimate Alien, Victor Despoils. In Victor Despoils, Heatblast is used to fight off King Victor at the end of the episode. I love that he terraforms a platform to ride on in the form of a rock. Something that he teaches Alan to do in Alien Force, though we never see classic Heatblast do this properly. Though we will get to see a young Ben do this in Omniverse, but one step at a time here. Seeing Heatblast use a combination of his pyrokinesis, his flight, and his agility is pretty cool. I think this scene does a pretty great job at introducing Heatblast back into the present day, so let's see what else UAF Heatblast has to offer. And looking at his list of appearances, unfortunately there's not much. But let's see if this is a case of quality over quantity, and see if Heatblast was utilized pretty well in the UAF era. His next appearance would be in The Ultimate Sacrifice. When Sentient Ultimate Big Chill freezes Ghost Freak, Ben turns into Heatblast to melt the ice, and then immediately turns into Brainstorm. It's a cameo, but it's one I enjoy, so I have no problem with it, especially since it shows Ben's quick thinking with his quick changes. His final appearance in Ultimate Alien would be in the episodes The Beginning of the End and Ultimate Enemy Part 1. It's nice that we get to see Heatblast fly, and the way he crashes down on these rocks is pretty neat, I guess, but other than that, he just has a quick battle with Vilgax, and then he's gone. Although seeing him melt the rocks underneath Vilgax similar to how he melted the street in Secrets was pretty nice. I don't think the correlation was intentional, but I noticed it anyway. And we do get more terraforming, which is one of my favorite Heatblast abilities. It's a shame that Heatblast didn't get as much love in Ultimate Alien as Fourarms. Although despite having less appearances, I think he was handled better in Ultimate Alien. When compared to Fourarms, I mean. From a unique standpoint, Heatblast's terraforming is something that only he can do, whereas Fourarms fighting is something you can see from Humongousaur easily, which trust me, Ultimate Alien is not shy from showing. But it is a shame that Heatblast was barely used in Ultimate Alien. You kind of forget he even returned honestly with how little Ben used him. I would have loved to see a fast flying scene similar to Jet Ray and Alan's fight in Alien Force, and yes, I do notice the coincidence that my example includes a Pyronite. Other stuff like his fire tornadoes or fire absorption would have also been great to see come back. While his scenes in Ultimate Alien don't compare to Classic, I still think that his scenes are fine enough. I enjoyed what we got, even though it was very little, which I think is important. Now let's move on to Omniverse Heatblast, and see if there's any improvements or devolvement for his overall handling, starting with his design and his voice. Omniverse Heatblast compared to Classic and UAF isn't really that different. The only thing that's really different about him is his bigger shoulders and his bigger forearms. I prefer the slimmer build from Classic and UAF, but I think Heatblast still looks pretty good here. The one thing that I prefer for this design over UAF is that the lines for his eyes return. I'm not sure why they took him out to begin with, and I should mention for the case for 11-year-old Ben that he looks exactly identical to 16-year-old Heatblast, so there's nothing really to talk about there. It would have been nice if 11-year-old Ben did have a slimmer build similar to Classic and UAF to sort of show a sense of growth for how much stronger Ben's gotten with age as Heatblast. One thing I do want to mention is that I'm glad they decided to keep the darker rocks for his body. I think they contrast with his fire better. And since I haven't mentioned it up to this point, I might as well bring up Ben 10,000's Heatblast since I kind of forgot to earlier. I think it's pretty cool that he has volcanic shoulders, although I wish there was more to this design other than that. And I might as well share my thoughts on what I think of Gwen's Heatblast and 4-year-old Heatblast since I didn't share my opinion on them earlier. I think Gwen's Heatblast is perfectly fine. The proportions aren't too different, but different enough where you can tell it's a female Pyronite. And for 4-year-old Heatblast, I like that his head is cartoonishly big compared to his body. In Omniverse, Heatblast is now voiced by David Kaye. His portrayal kinda reminds me of Steve Bloom's in Classic, although this time they give him more of like a raspy voice as if he was some sort of smoker, which does fit given his powers. I honestly can't decide if I prefer Steve Bloom or David Kaye as Heatblast, because I always go back and forth. Steve Bloom is iconic, but David Kaye really does a great job as Heatblast. Let me know what you think, because honestly, I'm not sure which Heatblast voice is the most popular. I want to guess it's probably Classic because, you know, it's Classic, but I feel like David Kaye does such a solid enough job that I feel like he's a contender for best Heatblast voice.
I've defeated Vilgax the Conqueror, Dagon the Destroyer. What makes you think you're any better? What? No dog? No cat? Nothing to wear the Nematrix for you? It's not like you're gonna use it yourself. Or are you already plumb loco?
Plum Loco? Crazy fruit?
Come on, new Omnitrix. Would it kill you to give me Humongousaur? Just this once?
As we move on to Heatblast's screen time in Omniverse, I'm happy to say there's more to talk about compared to UAF, but the question is whether or not Heatblast is utilized well within those appearances. To find out, let's start by talking about his first appearance in Omniverse in A Jolt to the Past. Heatblast is used to chase down Corvo, and the scene itself is pretty good. One thing I like about Heatblast flying here is that at one point he's about to land, but then he slows down and like shoots some fire in order to flip himself around and gain momentum to keep flying. If there's one thing Omniverse Heatblast does well, it's how he flies. Although the real spectacle is Heatblast's appearance. This is Omniverse Heatblast's aesthetic at its best. He looks so good here. I'm not sure if it's because Heatblast is appearing at night specifically, or maybe they wanted to add some extra pizzazz early on, but that emphasis on his glow looks so good, and I really wish they kept that throughout the rest of his appearances. At the risk of being the biggest glazer for Heatblast's terraforming ever, I love that he uses it once more in Trouble Helix in other episodes such as Store 23. In the case of Trouble Helix, he uses the terraforming platform as an attack, which reminds me of this meteor attack that Lilina does in Smash Crusade, which by the way is funny as fuck. And to talk about Store 23 real quick, I like that Heatblast melts the street to slow down Tetrex, just like he did for Vilgax in Secrets back in Classic. One episode I really want to highlight for Heatblast is Malfactor. He's used a couple times in this episode, and while he doesn't do anything necessarily cool, I love how he looks. Like, every frame of him specifically looks so good. And if I'm going to talk about Heatblast moments in Omniverse, I do want to highlight And Then There Was Ben real quick. Seeing a recreation of Ben turning into Heatblast for the first time was pretty sick. It's such a fantastic love letter to those who have been watching since the original series. I also want to talk about Heatblast's final appearance in Omniverse, which is Stuck on You. In terms of the fight against Kyber, there's nothing really that special about it, but I do love the transformation sequence shown here. This shit did not have to go this hard. I think it's safe to say that Omniverse Heatblast was handled better than UAF Heatblast just off the principle that they gave him more to do. I know to focus on quality over quantity, but to be fair, they barely gave appearances to UAF Heatblast. Regardless of the era, Heatblast's utilization overall is incredibly solid. He has a lot of cool moments, creative scenes, and overall he's fun and entertaining. Although there is one factor about Heatblast I feel like that isn't appreciated as much as the factors I just mentioned. That is the sense of progression. Now I'm not just talking about how Ben quickly learns to use Heatblast in the pilot, but I'm referring to how Ben sort of struggles with some of Heatblast's abilities at first, and over time we see those abilities perfected. And we also see Ben utilize these powers in new ways as the show goes on. Abilities such as Heatblast's flying, his terraforming, and his fire constructs are all examples of this. Although one nitpick I do have is that Heatblast's transformation sequence should have only been in the pilot and in Secrets for Season 1. I only say this because the first time Ben turns into Heatblast, he's shocked and he has no idea what the fuck is going on. The first time we see his transformation sequence proper is in the episode Permanent Retirement. It should have been in Secrets, to be a nice little parallel to the inexperienced Ben in the pilot compared to the one that's more experienced by the end of Season 1. I even get the sense of progression for Omniverse Heatblast, because while it is cool to see Heatblast fly in Classic, in Omniverse they take it a step forward, giving him creative ways to maneuver around enemies or keep the momentum going. I didn't even mention his cool flip maneuver he does in Malfactor. I love that we get more stuff like that in Omniverse. I haven't really talked about UAF Heatblast for this topic, but that's mainly because I feel like while he does do some good stuff there, none of it really feels fresh or new besides the terraforming, which while I do enjoy, isn't necessarily that new considering we see Alan do it in Alien Force. But if you couldn't tell, I enjoyed Heatblast a lot in the show. And my enjoyment doesn't stop there, because now I want to take some time to talk about Heatblast in terms of media, merchandise, and artwork. Heatblast has a lot of great artwork. So many of them have dynamic poses, and I love that he's shooting fire in a lot of them too. Look at this one where he's like catching his own fire in the other hand, or when he's like standing behind a whole bunch of fire. Sigurd can never. I'm sorry, I just can't help myself. Although look at this one for Ultimate Alien Heatblast. Why the fuck is he flying in this way? Is his ass stuck in Crazy Gadget or something? Although a part of me does want to nitpick on this art of Heatblast. This is my absolute favorite artwork of anything classic Ben 10 related like ever. I need a poster of this shit. But why the fuck does Heatblast's badge placement look so off to me? I also love how for the Cartoon Network website back in 2006 when Ben 10 first came out, all the other classic aliens, at least most of them, have these really cool poses, and then Heatblast is just fucking standing there. Though to be fair, the aura farming he does speaks for itself. And of course there's crew member art that looks really good, although most of it of course is focused on classic Heatblast. But there is one crew member art of Ultimate Alien Heatblast and it goes so fucking hard. Heatblast also has plenty of cool merchandise to talk about. There's the standard 4-inch figure as well as a battle version toy that gives him a projectile. They try to give him a more fiery look, which I think looks okay. There's also the Epic Heatblast, which, by the way, I forgot to mention for Fourarms, but in both cases they look pretty cool. And for Heatblast's vehicle, we get another animal, in this case a phoenix, which is very clever for obvious reasons. I absolutely adored the Metamorph figure. Not only is the articulation on this great, but the function of it being a flashlight is so clever given Heatblast's abilities. I wish I could say the same for the DNA Alien Hero figure though. It's not a bad looking figure. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the transparent look, but the articulation sucks. Which is so weird because the 4-inch figure has pretty decent articulation, so what the hell happened with this figure? And like Fourarms, he also has miscellaneous stuff such as an alien rock or a sumo slammer or something. I do want to mention that there is a Heatblast Pez dispenser, which I think is kind of funny. And Heatblast also has some Funko Pops. I hope we get more of these because I do own the Heatblast one, but I want to see other aliens get this treatment. I know it will never happen, but if we get a Snare one, holy shit, that would be so peak. Sadly, Ultimate Alien Heatblast doesn't give us any figures besides a classic Heatblast with Upchuck's color scheme, but I do think the green looks good on him. Omniverse thankfully gives us a few toys to talk about. He has a 4-inch figure, and this is where I think that the bigger shoulders look problematic, because it just doesn't really look that good on the toy. Although I do like how the 6-inch figure looks. I think that this toy does a better job at giving off a fiery effect than the battle version toy for classic Heatblast. As you would expect, Heatblast also makes plenty of appearances in the Ben 10 video games. He's one of the playable aliens in Protector of Earth, and I really like how he plays. I love that they gave him a gliding ability similar to how he flies in the show. I also love that he could do fire tornadoes as well as breathing fire like a dragon. They even give him the ability to absorb fire in this game. Heatblast also makes an appearance in Galactic Racing, as well as Ben 10 Omniverse 1, and in both cases I think he's handled pretty well, although not nearly as interesting as Protector of Earth. Although I do want to mention that I played Omniverse on the DS for the first time, and in that game Heatblast has a mid-air attack I really like. It kind of reminds me of when like his head would go all fiery and explode a little bit in the show. Heatblast also appears in plenty of Flash games as well, and like Fourarms, his appearances are okay. Although I do love spamming the shit out of his fireball in the Blockade Blitz game. Before I finish off Heatblast's segment of the video, I want to take some time to talk about some of his lore. In his battle version toy, his card states that Pyros is a functioning sun, and the artwork we get for it looks pretty decent. Not as interesting as the other planets we see from the battle version lineup, but it's still pretty good. I also want to mention Heatblast's predator, Crabdozer. I love learning about which aliens got predators in Omniverse, and Heatblast having one is pretty cool. And I love that Crabdozer is made of rocks, considering that you can't really burn rocks. I also love the fact that they orbit around Pyros kind of like asteroids. That is such an interesting way to incorporate Crabdozers into Pyros' lore. With a great combination of cool powers, creative use of screen time, and plenty of merchandise and exposure, it's no shock that Heatblast is incredibly iconic. I dare even say the most iconic Ben 10 alien. This video isn't about debating who's the most iconic, but if it was, I'd say Heatblast, even if he's not my favorite of the aliens for this video. Now that Heatblast is wrapped up, we only have 2 more aliens to talk about, so the next alien I want to move on to is the walking chandelier himself, Diamondhead. Diamondhead is a Petrosapien from the planet Petropia, and would first appear in the very first episode of Ben 10, and then there were 10. I love how great Diamondhead's character design is. The crystalline motif and the bulky body fit extremely well. I love the slanted flat top on his head with the spike on the back, as well as the 4 crystal spikes he has on his back. Although my favorite part of this design actually goes to his uniform. I love the half black and half white look, where there's a black patch on the white side where the Omnitrix badge is located. And while it's not canon, I love that the Ben Ben 10 DNA Lab fusions of Diamondhead actually take advantage of his pattern design to a more creative extent. Diamondhead is played by Jim Ward, who also voices Accelerate, who we'll get to later on. And the fun fact I learned is that Jim Ward was also in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show where he played Dracula, so the fact that Diamondhead and Accelerate's voice actor was in the show is very fucking funny.
Greetings. You must be Mario. You must be Luigi. You must be kidding. This place is a dump.
As for the voice itself, I think that Diamondhead sounds pretty good. He's got a nice deep voice that fits his character design pretty well.
So what can this guy do?
I don't know, but I bet it's gonna be cool. Like this is my fault? Whose idea was it to drain out all the powers of the watch? Not mine.
And on the subject of sound design, I love the crystal sound effects you hear whenever Diamondhead moves around. It's not something that they needed to do, but I love that they did because it really emphasizes how this alien's physiology works.
Gotcha! Sorry, lady. I thought you were a butt-ugly alien.
As for Diamondhead's powers, his main ability is to manipulate the crystals that he's made out of for different types of constructs. He can shoot them as projectiles or create giant structures that can help him in battle, and out of the original 10 is one of Ben's most durable aliens. Unless he's attacked by something sound-based, or tries to physically attack something that's way stronger than his material, Diamondhead can withstand nearly anything. When comparing the original 10's power kit, I think Diamondhead is one of the most creative. And as we talk about Diamondhead's screen time, we're gonna see how truly creative he can be. And to properly start talking about Diamondhead's screen time, let's start with his debut and then there were 10. Diamondhead is used at the end of the episode to fight off a giant drone that Vilgax sent to retrieve the Omnitrix. I love this transformation sequence. I love the crystals going up the arm, and that slow spin into the pose is great. We also get a second variation of this in Hunted, which I prefer. I like the eye transition a lot more as it feels more dynamic, as well as the part where the back crystals are coming out, because unlike the original where it just like comes out normally, there's a bit of an oomph to it. Like it's not just one clean swoop, it has to like push its way through. Although I was always confused on why he keeps bumping his shoulders like that, but who cares, this goes hard as fuck. In just one appearance, we get to see so many cool things that Diamondhead can do. The first thing we see is Diamondhead slicing metal with his arm by forming it into a blade, and seeing him create small diamond spikes around that arm is so fucking sick. There's also this moment where Gwen's about to get crushed by a tree, and Diamondhead creates a whole mountain of crystals on his back to slice the tree in half. When his arm gets restrained by the drone, he creates crystal spikes all over his arms to blow up the arm. And to defeat the drone, he reflects the laser back at them. I don't think there needs to be much explanation as to why this scene kicks ass for a debut. And I'm happy to say that with his future appearances, it gets even better. So let's discuss exactly how. The opening of Secrets has this pretty raw threat from Diamondhead that I absolutely adore. And it's also the first time we see Ben create constructs separate from his own body, which have tons of creative use cases. In Framed, I love how Diamondhead creates blades out of his fingers and shoots them into the sacked soldiers' guns. It's a small moment, but it really showcases the accuracy that Ben has as Diamondhead. Grudge Match is also a pretty fun scene. I like seeing Diamondhead with some slicing action, and this frame of him shooting crystals is sick as fuck. Also, when he catches the crystal that Kevin shoots at him and then he basically shit talks his powers, that shit goes so hard. Then there's episodes like The Unnaturals. The glowing eyes and zoom in, the flip with the crystals being shot out at all angles, this scene is so fun. I also like how he uses his own crystal constructs to protect himself from an explosion. And before I get into the most creative stuff from classic Diamondhead, I want to mention that in Hunted, I like that we see Ben practice with Diamondhead with a whole obstacle course. And of course how cool it was to meet another Petrosapien in the form of Tetrax. But if you want to really see some fun creative Diamondhead stuff, look no further than Perfect Day and Ben 10 vs the -10 Part 1. In Perfect Day, in order to catch a bust that Volcanus throws, he doesn't just make a simple construct to catch it, he creates a whole fucking arm to catch it. Look at how cool this giant crystal arm is. Then when 6-6 shoots at Diamondhead, he creates himself a ramp to use, and the way he deflects his shots with his crystal swirl is so wicked. In Ben 10 vs the -10 Part 1, Diamondhead is used to slow down a non-stop rust bucket. He creates a crystal anchor and swings it around like a whip. I wonder if Diamondhead has mastered the art of the whip dangle. Then there's a moment where he stops a falling elevator with his own blades, and makes a huge platform to get to the top floor, something we see done again in Omniverse. Although my favorite Diamondhead moment in Classic might have to go to A Change of Face. Seeing Diamondhead use his own crystal projectiles to create ramps to slide off of one after another across rooftops is top tier adaptation, top tier utilization, top tier creativity, this shit is top tier period. And while it may be considered cheating to some, this deleted scene in Back with a Vengeance where Diamondhead flips in the air and uses his blades to not fall off is pretty cool too. And like Heatblast, I should mention that Diamondhead was also in the live action movie Race Against Time. I think he looks pretty okay. I think the crystals could have been a little bit more on the blue side, but the green crystals aren't that bad. Although I'm not a fan of how the suit is textured, something about it just doesn't feel right. They also try to recreate his transformation sequence from the show, and I give kudos to the attempt, but it's a little rough, especially around the head transition. And the quick fun fact, he's voiced by Darren Norris in this movie, who most of you will recognize immediately as Timmy Turner's dad, but the first role I always think of is Dark Schneider in the 90s Bastard OVA. I think this movie does a better job at showing Diamondhead's powers than they did for Heatblast. The one construct that he makes with his hands looks pretty decent, and the projectiles look okay too. And it is a little funny that Diamondhead has to wait in the girl's bathroom before reverting back to human. For some reason, this show really likes having Diamondhead in silly situations. And while it's pretty obvious to longtime Ben 10 fans, I should mention the fact that it is a funny coincidence that not only does Race Against Time have a Diamondhead fight in a gymnasium, but so does the Season 4 episode Goodbye and Good Riddance. Both scenes even have very distracting CGI. Although I should mention that Race Against Time does predate Goodbye and Good Riddance by about a year. It's pretty clear that Diamondhead not only had a creative and badass premise on paper, but he managed to exceed expectations when it came to how truly versatile his power kit can be. So can Alien Force Onward show off more of that versatility in action? Well, before we talk about that, we must first talk about his redesign and new voice as we move on to the UAF era. While this redesign involves ties with Chromastone, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on this design as its own thing. This is because I want to go into further detail regarding the ties to Chromastone when going over Diamondhead's lore. And as for my thoughts on its design as its own thing, I like it. I like the dark rock pattern, and I actually don't mind the Chromastone onesie as people call it. The darker purple rocks actually goes really well with his light blue crystals. And on the subject of this Diamondhead design, for any fellow Pokemon fans out there, please tell me I'm not the only one who saw Gigalith and his shiny as Chromastone and Diamondhead respectively. Diamondhead is voiced by D. Bradley Baker, and I think the voice is fine. He sounds really similar to Jim Ward, although at a higher pitch.
That all you got? In case you were wondering, this is what it's like to lose.
Although I will say this had potential to be my favorite Diamondhead voice, but more on that later. Now let's see how Diamondhead was implemented in UAF regarding his utilization, starting with Vengeance of Vilgax Part 2. After Ben as Chromastone gets shattered, he revives in the form of Diamondhead, which was an insane reveal that trailers shamelessly spoiled. It's so great to see the return of the giant constructs, but what I love especially is the floating crystals that Diamondhead homes in on Vilgax. I heard that this power is divisive in the fandom, but I'm personally a fan of it. This is also a complete 180 given Vilgax destroyed Diamondhead back in Secrets. After Vengeance of Vilgax Part 2, Diamondhead would make some casual appearances throughout Alien Force and Ultimate Alien. The next episode I want to talk about is In Charm's Way. I love seeing more of Diamondhead making trails of crystals along the ground. This is also the first time we see Diamondhead encase a person's body in crystal, something that is notable come Omniverse. Then there's the final battle Part 1, where Albedo uses Diamondhead against Kevin. Encasing Kevin's feet with crystals to keep him in place just to sandwich him with 2 crystal columns is an incredibly efficient and creative way to knock someone out. I should mention that in Vendetta, Diamondhead redirects energy, and this is due to the Chromastone tie-in, which I'll save for later. Alien Force treats Diamondhead pretty well, with a decent amount of appearances and neat things to do. Sadly, Ultimate Alien doesn't really do as much for Diamondhead, however. In fact, Diamondhead doesn't even appear until the 28th episode, which is an insane episode gap. The only things worth mentioning for Ultimate Alien is the episode Basic Training. It was neat seeing Diamondhead create a shield sort of like one that a knight would have, although that isn't something new for Diamondhead. And it is pretty satisfying to see him humiliate Brannigan. Even if Ultimate Alien kinda forgot about Diamondhead, his time in the UAF era was still pretty enjoyable. He still had plenty of new creative use of his powers and entertaining scenes. But while I was able to give some praise to Diamondhead in the UAF era, there are some flaws I want to bring up, and you may have noticed them throughout all the footage you've seen so far, and that's the inconsistencies with his presentation. When you look at Classic and UAF Diamondhead next to each other, what do you notice is the main difference? Besides the art style and character design. That's right, the animation. When Diamondhead shot projectiles, his hands would have this cool morph animation into an array of crystal spikes. But in UAF, it's just his fist being held out, which is such a downgrade. Here's the thing though, it didn't have to be like this. In episodes like If All Else Fails or Vendetta, they show the UAF era is capable of the hand morph, but they almost never bother. And this is far from the only inconsistency. It's very small, but I noticed that in Charm's Way, they use a sound effect for Diamondhead's powers that is only used in this episode. I like it, but why is it here but nowhere else? And then the other inconsistency had to do with his voice. Remember how I said that D. Bradley Baker had potential to be my favorite Diamondhead voice? That's because in the episode If All Else Fails, this is how Diamondhead sounds when Ben shouts his name.
Diamondhead!
If they had this filter on him at all times, this would be my favorite Diamondhead voice easily. I should stress that these flaws and inconsistencies are just nitpicks. I'm glad that Diamondhead was handled pretty well for the most part in the UAF era. So let's see if things get better or worse as we head into Omniverse. Diamondhead is one of my favorite redesigns in Omniverse. I think his proportions benefit the most from the Derek J. Wyatt art style. I love the uniform, and something about the simplistic, clean design just resonates with me. Although I do miss when there was 4 crystals on his back instead of 2. I'm glad they did away with the Chromastone onesie to help set himself apart from Chromastone. Although it's not like it matters much given that Chromastone may as well not be in Omniverse at all. 11-year-old Diamondhead is just classics but in the Omniverse art style, and for some reason the black patch is gone. I wish the black patch was still there because it really did add charm to the pattern of the original outfit. Without it, it just feels naked. Also, something I never noticed until now is that they do the black and white pattern for his feet, but only on one foot. Like, what was even the point? And while I'm talking about different Diamondhead designs, I might as well share my thoughts on the other variations now. I like the Ben 10,000 Diamondhead, although I do prefer the pattern going horizontal than vertical. I like both versions of Gwen's Diamondhead, but I do prefer the classic one. I think adding Gwen's jeggings and shoes for Diamondhead is a little much. It's not like you see gray matter in baggy cargo pants. Then there's Mad Ben's Diamondhead, which looks really good. I like the straps and the spikes for his armor. This might be an unpopular opinion, but the only thing I would alter really is the mohawk. And while it never shows up in the show proper, I really love Albedo's color scheme for Diamondhead. This is one of my favorite Albedo color palettes easily. Diamondhead this time around is voiced by Eric Bauza, who does a pretty good job. It sounds similar to classics with Jim Ward, though not nearly as deep. And while I didn't mention this for UAF Diamondhead, one thing they didn't do was add those crystal sound effects when he moves around, and I'm glad to say that Omniverse brought them back, which you can hear in this footage of Eric Bauza's performance as Diamondhead.
There's a triple cheeseburger with my name on it.
There's some numbers up here. 35.35-118.96 and some crazy made-up word. Armadillo?
You're plumbers?
You're a duck!
Ben?
Oh, sorry. But come on, a duck? Am I the only one seeing this?
Let's start talking about how Omniverse handles Diamondhead with his first appearance in Trouble Helix. Diamondhead is used at the end of the episode to defeat malware by encasing him in crystals. This is a notable feat for Diamondhead given how busted it is to be able to encase someone in a material you manipulate, especially on someone as powerful as malware. Then there's moments like Collect This, where he saves a trucker with curved ramps. It's short but so creative, I love it. Then there's the Ballad of Mr. Bauman, where he's basically doing the Sub-Zero slide. I wish he did this more often. Then there's Blukage and Driba go to Area 51, where he stretches his whole arm to fight Thunderpig. Like the floating crystals, I heard this power is divisive in the fandom. I personally don't mind it. It makes sense given that he can manipulate the crystal material he's made out of. Not to mention, as early as the very first episode of Ben 10, we can see that Diamondhead is able to manipulate his own body to make it grow. I did mention this in my Ben 10 shorts tier list, but he did technically do this all the way back in Classic, which is pretty neat. We also see Mad Ben do this as well in his dedicated two-parter. I want to mention Arrested Development because I'm not sure how to feel about Diamondhead being able to reflect Billy Billion's laser by standing there. It's like he casted Bounce in Dragon Quest. I also love that we see the platforms from Ben 10 vs the -10 Part 1 return in Ben again. My favorite Diamondhead stuff in Omniverse, however, goes to Clyde 5. When knocking away Clyde, he could have done a simple mountain of crystals, but this construct is so intricate. I love the dedication to the creativity. There's also this part where he chases after Clyde by surfing diamonds. He's surfing diamonds. How could you not enjoy this stuff? And while it doesn't necessarily count, even as someone who doesn't care for Scourge, I can't lie, Vampire in the Diamondhead helmet with a sword and a shield is so fucking sick. Omniverse Diamondhead was handled pretty well. There's rarely a dull moment for him, and I'm happy that they didn't fumble him like Fourarms. Diamondhead's powers are way too creative to be wasted, and it's good they recognize that. Before we move on to the final alien of this video, I want to take some time to give some appreciation to the merchandise or artwork Diamondhead has, as well as other forms of media that Diamondhead appears in. With his artwork, I want to start with these two pictures because holy shit, these are so fucking cool. Look at how many crystals are on his body, and check this one out where he's deflecting all these lasers. I also noticed that his concept art has more crystals on his back, kinda like what they would do with UAF Diamondhead. Also, holy shit, Juniper Lee, peak mentioned? Although not every single piece of art is that good. I'm not a fan of this picture of Diamondhead, mainly for one thing, the emphasis on the ribs. He sadly doesn't have as much crew member art as Heatblast or Fourarms, but there is this nice piece of artwork where he's included for Cartoon Network's 20th birthday. Where he lacks in crew member art, he doesn't lack in merchandise. As you can probably tell by now, like the other aliens I talked about, Diamondhead has a 4-inch figure and a battle version toy. His comes with a blade arm with spikes around it, just like in the first episode of the show. He also has a DNA alien figure toy with a blade arm, although for some reason the transparent arm always reminded me of a baby bottle. I'm weird like that. Diamondhead also had an epic figure, however in this case it went unreleased. And of course, just like Fourarms and Heatblast, he has miscellaneous stuff such as an alien rock and a sumo slammer. UAF Diamondhead also has a 4-inch figure, which comes with a weapon. In this case, it's the same shape as his blade arm with the spikes around it. In some cases, he was sold alongside an X-Ray Ben, as well as a DVD which includes The Secret of Chromastone. And then in the case of Omniverse Diamondhead, he has a 4-inch figure as well as a 6-inch figure, which looks pretty cool. When it comes to his appearances in the video games, he doesn't have nearly as much as Fourarms or Heatblast. But there is still some stuff to talk about. His first playable appearance in a video game, believe it or not, is Galactic Racing on the DS. In terms of the mainline Ben 10 stuff, he appears in Omniverse 1. I love this crystal trail attack you can do, and I'm also really happy that they brought back the floating crystals from Vengeance of Vilgax Part 2. He's also in the DS version of Omniverse 1. I don't really like how he plays because he's kinda clunky to me. He doesn't really have any combo flow as far as I'm aware, but he does have this one javelin move that basically treats every fucking enemy like they're Quan. Yes, he can get shit on too. He also appears in Omniverse 2, but only in the 3DS version. In terms of Flash games, one of my favorite Flash games is Ben 10 to the Rescue, and Diamondhead is used in the final level in a boss fight against Tetrax. You shoot crystals at him, or you make a shield to protect yourself. I also love this super attack where he shoots a whole bunch of crystals out of his back. This game has a pretty fun way to implement Diamondhead, so let's see if the other Flash games can do that too. He's in battle ready and he plays fine enough, okay. Though I can't say the same for Ben 10 Kraken Attack. He also appears in Ben 10 Cavern Run alongside Ghost Freak, although in that case, it's not very interesting considering that the whole game has you basically drawing a pathway and you don't really interact or use any aliens. They're both just here just because it's Ben 10, and they need an alien somehow. The final thing I want to talk about for Diamondhead is his lore, which includes his species, his planet, and his eventual ties to Chromastone. I may as well say my thoughts on Petropia without the Chromastone lore in mind first. I love the unique shape as it's more creative than when you compare it to the usual spherical planet. In Secret of the Omnitrix, we even see the interior in Tetrax's flashback, which I think looks pretty great. Looking at this one picture alone makes me want to learn more about how Petrosapien societies are, which according to the Battle version Diamondhead Toys card, has multiple kingdoms with different silicon-based life forms. And speaking of Diamondhead's cards, there's one card that actually mentions something very interesting. One of the Ultimate Alien cards actually mentions that his species has refractive eyesight, which can explain why his accuracy is so insane. And I like that they try to give a scientific explanation to how his powers work. And before anyone mentions it, yes, I am aware that Diamondhead was not originally an original 10 alien. That honor goes to Cannonbolt. And if you ask me, I think they made the right call in making Diamondhead an original 10 instead, as I find his powers way more interesting. But now let's talk about some Diamondhead lore that I'm not a fan of. Diamondhead's species, Petrosapiens, were once extinct. This was because of a mistake that Tetrax made as revealed in Secret of the Omnitrix. However, in Alien Force, it's revealed that Chromastone species, Crystal Sapiens, aka one guy named Sigilite, is basically the key to resurrecting the Petrosapiens. This effectively retconned Chromastone's original planet, Morotesi, which if you remember from my Ben 10 lore video, I preferred over this retcon. I also don't like the idea of Diamondhead and Chromastone having ties with each other. With millions of aliens in the universe, I like the idea that there just happen to be two aliens that coincidentally look very similar, but when you give them ties to each other, it just feels less interesting. But that's just me personally. Even if you ignore the fact that resurrecting the Petrosapiens undoes the consequences Tetrax had to face, I think that the way they went about bringing the Petrosapiens back to life was dumb and unneeded, especially since this event is never brought up again in the entire franchise. It's like they only did this just because they could. Even with this blemish in mind, Diamondhead's runtime throughout the entire franchise has been incredibly solid. More than solid even. He is without a doubt one of the most creative aliens in all of Ben 10. The power to control crystals seems so simple, but the way they execute him is so creative, I love it. When I was a kid, I always thought Diamondhead was neat, but I never really appreciated him like I do now. Whenever someone would ask me what I thought of Diamondhead, I'd be like, he's alright, he's cool. But now, I see why people love him so much and why he's considered one of the most iconic aliens in all of Ben 10. The funny thing is that he's not even in my top 10 aliens, but thanks to my realization to how cool he is over the years, I would be a fool to deny how iconic Diamondhead really is. I don't think it's up for debate if he earned his spot on the Mount Rushmore of Ben 10. Now it's time we finally talk about the final alien for today's video. He happens to not only be my favorite of the 4 aliens for this video, but is also my favorite of the original 10. That alien is the dashing dino Accelerate. Accelerate is a Kinosolaran from the planet Canet, and would first appear in the very first episode of Ben 10, and then there were 10. Accelerate's main ability is his super speed, and his character design absolutely complements that in the most clever ways possible. His design is inspired by a velociraptor, an incredibly fast dinosaur. He's got a helmet similar to that of a motorcyclist, complete with a sick-ass visor. And I love the fact that Accelerate's helmet is made up of parts of his skin and skull. That's so fucking sick. I love how alien that feels. The black orbs on his feet are a pretty unique touch, and the black and blue color scheme is great, especially with the speed trail that he leaves behind whenever he runs. And as a huge Sonic fan, I'm obligated to tell you that yes, the fact that he reminds me of Sonic for being blue and fast is a factor of why I love him so much. And it especially helps that I became both a Ben 10 fan and a Sonic fan around the same time. Accelerate is played by Jim Ward, just like Diamondhead. His voice is also somewhat raspy, which fits incredibly well.
You're no plumber. You're nothing but a big drip. I was thinking more like a snowball slaughterfest. Wasn't planning on it. Peekaboo.
I also want to share a fun fact that he's my grandfather's favorite voice for an alien, so it does make me wonder what he'll think of Omniverse Accelerate's voice. And while I'm talking about Accelerate's sound design, how can I not show appreciation to the iconic sound whenever Accelerate puts his visor on? Accelerate already had me hooked on his design alone. I mean, just look at him, he's that fucking alien. But the question is, how well did they utilize him in the classic series? Considering that Accelerate is not only my favorite of the original 10 and my favorite alien for this video, but one of my top 5 favorite aliens of all time, that probably answers your question. But it wouldn't be a very interesting video if I didn't explain more and left it at that. So let's now discuss how well Accelerate is utilized throughout the classic series, starting with his first appearance in And Then There Were 10. Accelerate is used at the very end of the episode. Accelerate uses some of his super speed to help clean up and everything, but what's really fun is the fact that Accelerate uses his super speed to get back at Cash and JT for earlier in the episode. While this was a nice first appearance for Accelerate, this is just a small teaser for what Accelerate is really capable of. The real fun with Accelerate begins with the episode, The Kraken. This episode has Accelerate's first proper action scene, and it's so fucking sick. They don't waste any time showing off Accelerate's speed in interesting ways, as we get to see Ben learn how to run on water. Seeing Ben learn how to run on water in real time has the same type of hype feel that you get from playing Sonic 3 for the first time and running on the water in Hydro City Zone. We also see Accelerate form a cyclone with his super speed, something that occurs a few times throughout the series. One example is the Galactic Enforcers. I love this moment where he runs up the wall and attacks 6-6, that shit is so clean. Another cool moment with Accelerate is in the episode Monster Weather. I love seeing him run down the streets and up the buildings all around Chicago, and creating a cyclone in midair to funnel Sam is pretty damn cool. We also get to see what his skeleton looks like, which is pretty interesting. Also, Accelerate, you are not slick. You can try all you want, but you'll never be Ritsu Tainaka. I know to many that Merry Christmas is an oddball of an episode, but seeing Accelerate ice skate and pull a Crash Bandicoot is a lot of fun. I also love the small detail that when he runs on snow, it melts due to how fast he's going. There's a few small moments with Accelerate's speed I want to highlight despite how brief they are, such as his flurry kicks in the Alliance. I love when we get some fast-paced combat with Accelerate, although I wish we got some of it with his claws. I like how they're used to cut up the vines in Camp Fear, and in Secrets, Ben does attempt to use these against Vilgax. That twinkle gives off some dark implications, like he was gonna behead Vilgax and give him the old Eldigant treatment. Sorry, I had to complete the trio. Speaking of Accelerate's moment in Secrets, being able to run around all of Mount Rushmore in seconds is crazy, and check out this shot of him running, he is so fucking cool. I love the poses he does when casually avoiding enemy shots in Ben 10 vs. the -10 Part 1. And I also want to mention the episode The Return. It's not appreciated enough how clever it was for Accelerate to run fast for long enough to have the hunk of metal be teleported away instead of him. Also, don't lie. On everyone's soul, we all thought if we had an Omnitrix, we'd use Accelerate to clean our rooms in seconds, so I'm glad that Goodbye and Good Riddance show that off. That's a lot of episodes I mentioned, and there's still 2 more I want to mention before we move on with the next portion of the video. The first of those 2 episodes is Ben 10,000. Not because of the design for Ben 10,000's Accelerate, although it is very clean, but because early in the episode he scans Exoskull? Like he could just scan stuff with his visor? I'm shocked no one ever talks about this because it's so random. The Ben 10 wiki didn't list this as a power for Accelerate, so maybe I'm not seeing something, but either way, I figured I'd bring attention to it. The last episode is one you probably saw coming, which is the episode The Unnaturals. Accelerate going so fast that everything around him doesn't just slow down, but stops at a standstill is a crazy feat. It's a shame we never see Accelerate fight at this speed. Accelerate. As much as I love him, that does feel like a pretty big missed opportunity. Accelerate had a whole bunch of insanely fun scenes in the classic series. You'd think with just super speed and nothing else, he'd be a bit samey after a while, but thankfully the show knows how to put Accelerate's power kit to good use. So now let's see if Accelerate's good use is implemented well in the UAF era. To describe Accelerate in the UAF era is like Zoro's sense of direction, as in non-existent. Yes, for some reason, despite how beloved Accelerate is, and how prominent he was in the classic series, unlike the other 3 aliens I talked about, Accelerate does not appear in UAF at all. The only time he ever shows up is in the intro, and his hologram in the episode The Eggman Cometh. Now thankfully, there is one time UAF Ben does use Accelerate, and that's the Generator Rex crossover. He's only in one scene for a cameo to save Holiday, but it is nice that he showed up. His appearance is the same as classic, and he doesn't speak, so there's not much to talk about here. Now I'm sure you're expecting me to mention Fast Track. Despite Accelerate clearly being superior, I don't dislike Fast Track. Far from it actually. This video isn't dedicated to Fast Track, but it's a shame he gets so much hate for being a worse Accelerate. He's genuinely fun, and similar to what I said in my Ito video when comparing him to Upchuck, I see no issue in 2 cool aliens being similar and coexisting. It's odd they created a blue fast alien like Fast Track when Accelerate could have easily come back, especially when you consider he could scan Helen to get him. Supposedly the reason Accelerate didn't come back is because they couldn't animate his tail. I'm not an animator, but I can't help but feel that excuse sucks. If they can have Helen show up, why not Accelerate? Because of the stripes? Is it really that hard? I'm not sure if this is 100% true, so take this with a grain of salt, but if that is the case, then that does really suck. Thankfully, Omniverse properly brought him back, so while it's a clear upgrade from the UAF era, we must see how Omniverse compares to the classic era. Can it have the same type of fun and hype, or does it end up fumbling? Let's start with Omniverse Accelerate's design. It's not too different from classic, and there are a few things I really like. His proportions give off motorcycle vibes, which fit his powers, although sometimes it does look a bit off. Whenever I see Accelerate stand upright, it kinda reminds me of the gay little monkey meme. I'm not sure if I'm in the majority or the minority, but I think the visor looks better in Omniverse. I like the indent and the darker color. I'm not too big on the longer head shape or the green separation going up to his neck. And speaking of the separation, I think the white separation for 11-year-old Ben looks better. We also have Gwen's Accelerate, which I like for the most part. I like the light and dark blue separations, and the V-neck type section for her Omnitrix badge is pretty neat too. I would personally do away with the hair clip and freckles, but I also don't hate it. Ben 23 also turns into Accelerate, known as Speedy Quick, and it's a nice recolor. Blue and gold are my favorite colors, so I'm gonna like most Ben 23 colors anyway. In Omniverse, Accelerate is voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. It's basically Ben's voice with a higher pitch. I think Yuri does a pretty great job with Ben's aliens like Kick and Hawk, Feedback, and especially Amphibian, but something about Accelerate feels kind of weak.
Huh? Oh nah, I got bored. I'm reading an article on the new Space Sumo Slammers movie in 3D! Don't worry, just gotta run through all the possible codes. How can you be this heavy? What do you have, rocks in your pockets?
From the cave. They remind me of Shilane.
Between Yuri and Jim's Accelerate voices, I prefer Jim's personally. Accelerate's Omniverse design has some stuff I like more than Classic, but also stuff that I dislike, but it's nothing too bad. But you have to try to fuck up Accelerate, so there's still promise for him to have a lot of great moments in Omniverse. So let's see what Omniverse Accelerate has to offer. Accelerate has some opening scenes in Omniverse I really enjoy. Rules of Engagement has a pretty fun Accelerate scene, and while it ends up failing, I love that Accelerate attempts to remove the oxygen for Festina by surrounding her in a vortex. Knowing he's capable of this makes him even more dangerous than he already was from what we saw previously. Then there's his scene in The Avengers where Accelerate saves people from a burning building while Nesmith and Will Harang act like dipshits. I loved when Accelerate made a Cyclone against a Waybat in Frogs of War Part 2. Despite the addition of green in his color scheme, the Cyclone itself still looks pretty great, and using one to get a Waybat to lose balance is pretty damn impressive. We see another Cyclone in A New Dawn where Accelerate battles a past Vilgax, although in this case it's made of the water they're fighting in. Makes me kind of wish we saw more of Accelerate use the terrain around him to his advantage. The last major scene I want to mention is the episode Store 23. Accelerate using his speed to unlock a code to a bomb is pretty neat, showing off Accelerate's dexterity and precision in a tight time window. I also love this part where he runs so fast that the window shatters and the car alarm goes off. It's pretty cool, but also easy to miss. If there's one thing I appreciate for Accelerate in Omniverse, it's the fact that his speed is emphasized with some regular everyday actions. One example being in the episode Third Time's the Charm, where we see Accelerate read a bunch of books in a few seconds. And I do want to bring up the episode Hot Stretch. It's really sweet to see Accelerate play street hockey with some young Kinesilarans. I won't lie, I didn't expect Accelerate to have as many highlights as I mentioned, but after being reminded of some moments like Store 23 and such, I'm glad to say Omniverse Accelerate was handled pretty well. I do wish some of his fights were more on the creative side, but I see the effort to make Accelerate entertaining, and I think it ended up working out for the most part. Now let's take some time to appreciate the merchandise and art for Accelerate, as well as other appearances he makes in other Ben 10 media. It should be no surprise that Accelerate has amazing artwork. Check out this one where he's running through a bunch of explosions, and this one where he's running straight at you. Like, this character design is so top tier. I also like this one where Accelerate has his foot out. It kind of reminds me of the Titanic rapping dog. I also love the shading on his Andrew Robinson art. There's also sketches for Omniverse Accelerate, and they look fantastic. I love these poses so much. Sadly, however, Accelerate barely has any crew member art to talk about, but what he does have is still nice. Accelerate has a 4-inch figure and a battle version toy. His battle version toy comes with transparent legs, and little add-ons to make it look like he's running fast like in the show. Accelerate's DNA Alien Hero figure is among one of my favorites of the lineup. The only thing that's a downside for me is the transparent chest. I'm not a fan of that. He has wheels under his feet to help him replicate the super speed he has in the show. Accelerate's Haywire figure has him with Ripjaw's color scheme. I also like the coincidence that not only were Accelerate and Ripjaws paired up for the Haywire lineup, but for the Alien Rock lineup as well. Which also makes me think of the coincidence that the first mistransformation in Season 1 was Ben trying to go Ripjaws and getting Accelerate, while in Season 2 he tries to get Accelerate and goes Ripjaws. Accelerate has plenty of miscellaneous stuff, but the one thing I really want to bring attention to is the Funko Soda, which looks pretty cool. Sadly, UAF and Omniverse Accelerate doesn't really have any merchandise. However, Omniverse Accelerate does have a prototype for a 4-inch figure, which looks pretty cool. I wish they made this because honestly I would have loved to own it. And they don't really do this for most of the aliens I've talked about, but the lenticular card for the classic 4-inch figure has a transformation sequence that's much better than the show. The one in the show isn't bad, but it's just very simple, in comparison to other aliens at least. And speaking of his lenticular card, one of the things mentioned on the back is that one of Accelerate's weaknesses is magnets, though we never see this in the show proper. Accelerate is playable in some of the video games. In Protector of Earth, he can create a predetermined path used both for puzzle solving and for combat. He can also create a cyclone like in the show. He also appears in both Omniverse games. In all three of these cases, he's implemented pretty well. The only Flash games worth mentioning besides Battle Ready is Blockade Blitz because I really enjoy that game, and Ben 10 to the Rescue. In Ben 10 to the Rescue, he's in the first level of the game, where you run on a highway to chase after Tetrax who kidnapped Gwen. I love the boost attack you can do, and I love how the running animation is just like in the Kraken, and his jumping animation kinda looks like a frame in Lucky Girl. Accelerate's planet has some of the most unique lore when compared to other aliens. On the planet of Kinet, days are only a few minutes, and the lifespan of a Kinesolaran is only a few weeks. They're basically the fruit flies of Ben 10. Originally, Kinesolarans couldn't be on Earth besides Accelerate. This is due to how time works differently on our planet compared to Kinet. This was retconned in Omniverse, but I'm fine with it for all the cute names of all the Kinesolarans alone. Accelerate is just fantastic all across the board. Even despite his absent in Ultimate Alien, Accelerate still managed to be great in both Classic and Omniverse. As I said, he's my favorite of the original 10, and he's one of my top 5 aliens of all time. And I'm far from the only one who has Accelerate as one of their favorite aliens. During Classic, Accelerate won an alien poll held for the first 12 aliens in Ben 10. For the longest time, I thought I imagined this poll as the Ben 10 wiki had no info on it for years. It did at some point, but then it was gone for a while. But when I was recording for my Blitzwolfer video many months ago, I finally came across proof that the poll was real, and I popped off like crazy. The fact that he won the whole poll shows that not only was he iconic to myself, but to many Ben 10 fans all over. By now you can probably tell why these 4 aliens earned their spot on the Mount Rushmore of Ben 10. Each one has incredible use of their own power kits, and usually had either fresh new ways to implement their capability, or were just raw in general. Sure, in some cases there were some lower points, like Fourarms getting blander, Diamondhead being forgotten mostly in UAF, Heatblast barely appearing in UAF, and hell, even the fact that Accelerate doesn't appear in UAF period. But even with those flaws in mind, these 4 aliens have been immortalized as the most iconic aliens of Ben 10. Accelerate is the only one of these 4 aliens in my top 5 personally, but even I can't deny the greatness of Heatblast, Diamondhead, and even Fourarms despite my opinion of him lessening over the years. I think they're great, but as always, I'm curious of what you guys think. Do you believe these 4 aliens are the most iconic aliens of Ben 10? And if not, who do you think is? Who's your favorite of the 4 aliens in this video? And what's your favorite moment for that alien? I also want to give a quick shout out to those who got the hints correct on my community post. In this case, only one. Shout out to Adrian Armaclet who got Heatblast correct. I don't think I need to tell you why Sigurd was the hint for Heatblast. And I might as well explain the reasoning behind the other 3 hints. Simon Belmont was Diamondhead because in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, there is a diamond sub-weapon you can use to attack enemies, similar to how Diamondhead attacks with his own diamond-like material. Biorex was the hint for Accelerate. This is because he's a dinosaur from F-Zero, which is a racing game. And finally, Stitch was Fourarms. This is because sometimes Stitch has 4 arms. If I did a 4-armed character, it'd be way too obvious. I appreciate you guys for stopping by, and as always, happy night hunting.